Live. This is Weekend Edition.
Welcome back. US President Donald Trump's tariff tiff with China threatens to dominate the G7 summit underway in France. It's expected he'll face questions from his international counterparts as the growing trade war threatens to tip the global economy over the edge. Joining me now live from New York is Sean King, Senior Vice President of Park Strategies. Hello to you, Sean. Now, the looming trade war appears to be more serious in the last couple of days. Yesterday, Donald Trump announcing increased tariffs on Chinese imports just before he left Washington. Are we expecting him to face backlash from the international community at the summit?
Probably. And I heard in your previous report, Boris Johnson criticized Trump for the trade war and say he champions free trade. I'm sure Trump and Johnson are going to get along great. But it's a little rich of him to be saying that when he's getting ready to lead the EU and put up walls between Britain and Europe. So I expect Trump to get pushback on his China policy, but I don't think he'll pay them much mind.
And Trump also has taken issues with France threatening to increase the tariffs on the country's wine in response to Emmanuel Macron's tax on global companies. Do you think Trump could perhaps leave this summit with more enemies than allies?
Well, he can't leave with more enemies than he left Quebec last year, because if you remember, he left Quebec in a huff, and he was tweeting against Justin Trudeau from Air Force One on his way to Singapore to meet his good buddy Kim Jong-un, which is why Trump whisperer Macron wisely suggests no communique this year. But Trump's bark is often worse than his bite on these things. I myself happen to prefer Italian wine. I don't expect any French wine tariffs. Whatever Macron pulled him aside this morning, it seems like they've smoothed things over. So I think it's status quo for now.
Yes, well, Trump doesn't even drink wine either. And Trump dismissed suggestions the US could be headed for a recession. Do you think world leaders will be bringing the issue up during the talks?
Well, of course they are. And the world economy is slower than the US economy, so Trump would be right to push back on that. You know, people here are talking about a recession. It seems like some on the other side are even hoping for a recession. And people are saying that the U.S.-China trade war are going to tip us into a recession. Now, I have my own views on the U.S.-China trade war, but the fact is that trade accounts for a lot less of the U.S. economy than it does for other countries. You know, only 27% of our GDP is due to trade, whereas, say, a country like Sweden, it's 91%. So we're not in the same situation those other countries are.
Now, the US has also offered Brazil assistance to fight the fires raging in the Amazon. Emmanuel Macron, he wants to ensure the issue is discussed at the G7. What can we expect, do you think, the outcome of that discussion?
Well, on the fires, I think probably America is the only country from which Brazil would accept assistance because the leader there feels a kindred spirit with Trump against the politically correct environmental police in the world, and he's going to tune out Macron and the rest of the G7. The G7, which is really a Cold War relic, the G20 is much more relevant to today's world. They're going to want to talk about things like global inequality and the environment, none of which interests Trump. I'm sure he's going to push them on backing the U.S. in the Strait of Hormuz against Iran, and also want to ask why Putin and Russia's not back and make it the G8. So I think the two sides are going to really talking past each other. I think everyone's hoping that it just emerges with no major fights or blowouts.
Yeah, it's certainly a huge challenge. We're hearing that a football pitch a minute is burning across the Amazon. Now, we've also just been reading a couple of hours ago that French riot police, they briefly had to use water cannons and tear gas to disperse anti-capitalism protests near the resort of Biarritz at the G7 summit, always attracting protesters. But in other news, police have also fired tear gas at protesters in Hong Kong for the first time in more than a week. Do you think this is a sign that demonstrations are here to stay?
Yes, absolutely. I don't see this situation resolving itself. Hong Kong is dying a slow death because in the year 2047, it'll just become another Chinese city. Its citizens are waking up to this fact. I give them full credit for standing up for themselves. But Xi Jinping's in a tough spot. I expect mainland Chinese troops to infiltrate and hide among Hong Kong police to try and put the demonstrators down. But I don't expect a mainland Chinese invasion of Hong Kong because that would then also lose the Taiwan general public and be ahead of its election. So I don't expect any kind of mainland Chinese crackdown, and I expect these demonstrations to stay for a while yet.
Sean King, Senior Vice President of Park Strategies, thank you so much for your time and expertise.
Thank you.